If today is your first time with us, we've been in a series called Divine Detours, and we're probably a couple months deep into it, getting ready to wrap it up next Sunday. But this series has been taking a closer look at the life of Joseph out of Genesis and identifying 10 character building tests or detours that he went through in his life, and they're the same ones that we go through in our life. We may have different circumstances and situations, but they're the same detours that we experience. And that's one of the reasons why we can identify a lot with Joseph. And another way that we can identify is that, Joseph kind of started his life out at 17 with kind of an idea of where it was gonna go, where it was gonna lead him. And life did what life often does. It rerouted him. And anybody in here ever have life reroute you before? Like you had this plan, you had this idea of where you would be at this stage in your life, and it just seems like all of that fell apart, or maybe financially you've been hoping to get ahead and to get ahead and get ahead, and then finally something happens and you think you're going to get ahead, and then you hit another brick wall, or you've been making some right choices lately and you're still experiencing just some negative results of really some good choices. That's kind of Joseph's story. Joseph had a dream. He had a picture of where life would lead him. But then he experienced some detours. His brothers betrayed him, threw him in a pit, going to leave him for dead. And then they end up selling him as a slave. And then he gets lied about. He gets falsely accused. He gets put into prison. And then while he's in prison, he helps a brother out, and that brother gets out of prison and forgets all about him. Like, have you ever helped somebody out and they just kind of move on with life, and you're like, yo, I thought you were going to hook me up. That's Joseph's life. That's what he is experiencing. And, I think that when we look at Joseph's life in that way, and we look at it over the last several months, there's a truth that keeps kind of surfacing throughout the stages of the story. And the truth is that God uses detours in our life to develop something that's in us before he does something through us. That there is a character development that has to happen in our lives in order for us to walk in his purpose for our lives. I like to say it kind of like this: character is the foundation that purpose is built on. And when we have a shaky foundation in our character, then we can't support the weight of God's purpose for our life. Now, oftentimes in life, we look at detours as negative, and we look at heartbreak, and we look at pain, we look at betrayal in our life, and we can see them as detours, but oftentimes it's difficult for us to recognize positive situations in our life that they could be detours also. Like success can be a detour in our life. We've talked about that in this series. We've talked about how opportunity could be a detour in our life. Another detour that we can experience in our life that isn't a negative one, it's a good one, is just the idea of today I have more than I had yesterday. And that's the kind of detour that I want us to talk about today. Today we're gonna step into the detour, the stewardship detour. And I want to tell you why this detour is so important. And I want to tell you why, because the temptation, especially at church, especially if you're giving a church a try, there's that kind of mantra that all the church wants is my money, and I'm sure there's some churches that are like that. But I really want to challenge you to lean into our time today, because this topic really matters in our life. And God asks two questions of us throughout our life, and the way that we answer those questions are not with the words that come out of our mouth, but the choices that we make in our life. In other words, we can say, God, I trust you. God, I love you. We can say that all that we want with our lips, but God actually looks at the choices that we make to determine that. That's why the indicator of spiritual maturity is the fruit that we produce in our life. And here's the two questions that God is always posing and throwing out there to us. The first one is, will you give me your heart? And this is the question that is connected to relationship. God wants a relationship with us. He doesn't want some ritualistic, like, check some boxes off. He wants a relationship with us. But the second question that he's always kind of posing throughout life is will you give me your life? And where the first one is talking about relationship, the second one is talking about our responsibility. You see, as Christ followers, when we give Jesus, when we surrender our life to Him, we don't just get eternity in heaven, but we also receive a responsibility. And that responsibility, Corinthians talks about that it is partnering with the mission of God to bring reconciliation to those that are lost. And this second question right here, will you give me your life? That ultimately is what the Stewardship DETOUR is all about. So if you got your Bibles, grab that. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 41 today. If you got your phone, you can tap the dot on the seat back in front of you and follow along. If you're sitting behind somebody that you do not like, just hit them upside the head with your phone and tell them, oh, I meant to tap the dot. My bad. But you can follow along with the notes in there, and we're going to be in Genesis 41 today. And Genesis 41, we've been here for a few weeks, but Genesis 41 starts with a dream. But this time it's not Joseph's dream. This time it's Pharaoh's dream. And this isn't the kind of dream that you and I might have, and we get up in the morning and we grab a cup of coffee and sit down with our beautiful leather-bound journal and just start journaling about, this amazing dream that we had. No, this is more of a nightmare, right? I mean, the nightmare that Pharaoh has is 7 fat cows get eaten by 7 skinny cows, and then 7 healthy heads of grain get swallowed by 7 shriveled ones. I mean, it's one of those dreams/nightmares that if you and I have, we wake up the next morning and we say, note to self, no more Taco Bell at 11 p.m. before I go to bed, right? It's one of those. And so Pharaoh has this dream, and nobody in his inner circle can interpret the dream. And then the cupbearer, who had spent time in prison with Joseph, and you can catch up on all of those parts of the Joseph story on our YouTube channel from previous weeks. But it was the cupbearer that then remembers Joseph. He was the one that forgot about Joseph, and now several years later, he remembers Joseph, that he's got this gift to interpret dreams. And so Pharaoh calls him up to the big league, so to speak, and he goes from a no-name person in prison to now standing before the most powerful man in the world. And Pharaoh asks him or mentions the dreams, and Joseph interprets them. And he tells Pharaoh, listen, what these dreams mean is that Egypt is going to experience 7 years of abundance. But then following the 7 years of abundance is going to be 7 years of famine. And the 7 years of famine is going to be so great that it's going to overtake the abundance from the first 7 years. And one of the things that I love about Joseph is that he doesn't just interpret the dreams, but he also provides a plan. And it's in Joseph's plan that creates space for God to use this moment to save a nation. And so I want us to look at that today in Genesis 41, verse 45. Here's what it says. Joseph, he takes charge. And I love that. The original word in the Hebrew means that he's proactive with his responsibility. He's given a responsibility instead of kind of pulling back and just kind of waiting. He's proactive with it. And so he takes charge of the entire land of Egypt. Verse 46 says that he was 30 years old. I want to stop right here for just a moment and point something out. Joseph is young, and I say young because I'm 49, so 30 is young to me. I don't know about you, but the younger I was, the younger old was. But the older that I get in life, the older old gets. You know, that just keeps kind of moving up. But Joseph is 30. He's a young guy, and he's untrained. So here's a guy that does not, he's now being put over all the economy of Egypt. He's second in command, and he's not coming in with some finance degree from FAMU or from FSU or Harvard or anything like that. He's never led a country through a crisis before in his life. All that Joseph has in this moment is the courage to say yes. And I want to say that maybe there's some teenagers in the room, maybe there's some college students in the room, maybe there's some young adults in the room, and you feel like your age because you're young or you're untrained, that God can't use you, or maybe you're an older person like myself in the room, and you look back over the rearview mirror of your life and you see all these mistakes and you see all these opportunities that now in hindsight you wish you would have gone right when you actually went left, and you see all of those moments in your life and you just assume that they disqualify you from whatever God has for you. And I would say that is so far from the truth. Like, you don't have to have a platform, you don't have to have a title, you don't have to have a degree, a position, whatever. You don't have to have that kind of stuff for God to do something big through your life. The only thing that you need is the courage to say yes. And God will do the rest. Here's what it says. That he's 30 years old, that when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, that he inspected the entire land of Egypt. And what ends up happening is what Joseph predicted. They would step into 7 years of abundance. And so in the next verse, it says that during those years, those 7 years of abundance, Joseph gathered all the crops that were grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. And finally, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. How many would say that's a good problem to have, right? Too much to measure. It's a great problem to have, but I don't want us to gloss over the kind of key thing that's happening here. That Joseph didn't look at this moment as an opportunity to stockpile for personal gain. He looked at it as an opportunity to stockpile for future impact. You see, what happens is they go through the 7 years of abundance, and that 7 years of abundance ends. Like every season in our life that's an abundant season, it always at some point comes to an end. And so now they're ushering in the famine season, the 7 years, and people from all over the region are starving, they're desperate. But notice this, it was because of Joseph's stewardship and his leadership in the season that Egypt doesn't just make it through famine, but they're actually positioned to meet the needs of people all around the world. And it says this in verse 57, that in people from all around. They came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. Now, what's happening here is you see Joseph, he's promoted, he's given more influence than he's ever had in his life, and he's given more money and access to money than he's ever had in his life. And so in a season like that of abundance, how does Joseph pass the stewardship detour? He passes it because he had this perspective, that he didn't see the more as permission to consume, but a responsibility to care. He didn't see those 7 years of gathering all the grain and just the overflow, so much so that he quit counting. He didn't see that as permission to just consume a bunch of stuff or to go do what he wants to do. He saw it as a responsibility to care for people. And here's what I've kind of learned in my 49 years of living and my 27 years or so of following Jesus, that how I steward what God gives me now is my answer to that question, will you give me your life? It's not how I say I will steward it when things change. It's what I'm doing now with what God has already given me that is my answer. And so today what I want to do is I want to take our last few moments together, and I want to give you 3 things that you and I have to do in our life if we're going to pass the stewardship detour in our life. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to pastor you in this moment real quick. That these 3 things that I'm going to give you are not just good financial tips. They are defining moments for your life. And the reason why I say they're defining moments for your life is because all of us at some point in our life, we come to a fork in the road. And one direction is our way, and the other direction is God's way. And each path, each road leads to a different destination. And I'm not saying that if you go your way, that means that you don't go to hell. I'm not saying that this fork in the road is heaven and hell. There is a choice. That's the heart choice. Will you give me your heart? That's the first question. And that is a heaven and hell. But where will you give me your life is more of a purpose question. And when we choose to go our way, then the best that we could ever get out of our life is our way. It's our purpose. But when we choose to go God's way, then the best that we can get is God's purpose for our life. And so these 3 things are not just good financial tips, they are defining moments in our life, and I want us to walk through them together. The first one is this, is we've got to put God first. Can't pass a stewardship detour if we're not going to put God first in our life. And one of the most telling questions that help us to identify if we're putting God first in our life is this question: what do we do first with what God gives us? Now, I'm going to step in, I'm going to create a little tension here in the room, but just stick with me for a second. What do we do first? Do we pay bills first? Do we go on vacations first? Do we do house renovation projects first? Is it kids' travel, sports that's first? I've got 3 kids, all traveled, okay? Is it, ladies, is it the Sheen order that's in your cart right now? That you're like, man, I just got paid, so here comes the Sheen order. Or guys, like, don't hate me, but is it that new boat? Oh, whew, man, I felt the push there. No, but the question is what do we do first with what God has given us? And here's the thing, I want to make sure that I'm clear. God, He doesn't mind us having all of those things. He doesn't mind us having them. God's concern is those things having us. And there's a big difference. And you may wonder, like, okay, well, how do I know if those things have me? You know, because you're feeling it right now, because I'm poking around in an area of your life that you're like, you have no business talking about this area of my life, right? Like you're feeling the tension. And the reason why you're feeling the tension is because there's things in your life that you're holding on to that you've not fully released and put God first in your life. And I'm using the word you, but it's really we. Like there's things in my life that God is constantly being like, Ryan, do you trust me? Ryan, are you going to live for me, right? It is a process that all of us go down in our life. And the reason why it's important for us to navigate that is because we can't walk into God's purpose for our life if we don't choose to put God first in our life. I'm going to step in one more layer, and then I'll get out. One more layer. This is the reason why tithing matters. What is a tithe? The tithe is 10% of what God blesses us with. We return back to Him as a way to tell God, I trust you, and I surrender the lordship of my life to you. It is the most tangible way for us to say, God, you are first in my life. Now, in 25 years of being a pastor, and all the pastors that I've known, I've never had one person, this is a 100% blanket statement that I'm saying here. This is my experience. I'm not supposing or putting this on you. This is my experience. 100% though, 25 years, personally, and all the pastors that I've ever known. Anybody that has ever argued against the tithe has never, 100%, has never argued against the tithe because they wanted to give more than 10%. Not one time have I had anybody argue because they wanted to give more than 10. The only reason why they've argued is because they wanted it as an excuse to give less. And here's all I'm saying with that is I don't think God gave it all, which was His Son Jesus, to come, and I don't think Jesus gave all of Himself on the cross so that we could step into a relationship with Him and get all that they have for us, but yet give very little. And so there's this wrestle because a lot of times the argument is that, well, tithe is law and all of that. It was the Old Testament. Well, actually, if you dig deeper, the tithe existed before the law was even created. And then Jesus in the New Testament affirms tithing. But if we wanted to get into that argument, you're like, we're not required to give 10%. That's Old Testament. That's fine. But you have two choices, because Old Testament is 10% and New Testament is 100%. Like New Testament is I give all of my life as a follower of Jesus. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can choose which one you want. But it is a tangible way for us to say that we are putting God first in our life. And here's why I say this, and it's not to guilt you, it's not to get more, like nothing in my lifestyle changes whether you decide to give or not. Mine's not tied to all of that stuff. It's not to put guilt on you, it's because I want the best for you. And at the end of the day, like, if God can't trust us with what we already have, what he's already given us, why would he trust us with anything more? You don't do it with your kids, right? If they're not appreciative of what they have, you don't go out and get them more stuff, because what does that do? It creates a spoiled kid that expects everything to be done for them. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's who we would become if God just kept blessing us and blessing us and blessing us, and we were never appreciative and thankful and faithful in what we had. Like, we would just become Christians who grow up spoiled and just nobody wants to be around, right? And so the first thing we got to do is we got to be able to put God first in our life. You guys did amazing. Not one person walked out in that section. I am so proud of you. I am seriously so proud of you. All right, second one. Let me get my pen. Second one. We got to learn to wait. Oh, you're like, I don't know which one's worse. I don't know which one's worse. We live in a culture that wants everything now, right? I mean, we just swipe, click, drag, whatever, boom, it's at our front door like a day or two later. If it's there 3 days, then we're upset, right? And we live in this culture where if I can have it now, then I should have it now. And here's the thing about not being able to wait is that it's a mindset that doesn't build wealth in our life. It actually builds debt in our life. Like, not being able to wait is a mindset that doesn't lead to peace in our finances. It leads to pressure in our finances. Here's what Proverbs says, that a faithful person is going to be richly blessed. And I want to stop right here, and I want to make sure that I clarify what's being said here. This is not the Brinks truck backing up in your driveway and dumping a bunch of money out, blessed. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about life in general. Does it mean that maybe God blesses us financially? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I would rather know that my kids are not strung out on drugs, that they grow up and they marry somebody that loves the Lord, and they raise their kids up in a way, in a healthy home, and things that I didn't have when I was growing up as a kid. To me, that's more blessed. Like, take the millions, right? I would rather have that. That's more of a blessing than anything else. And so he's saying a faithful person, somebody that's going to put God first, is going to be richly blessed, but one that's eager to get rich, where they're not going to go unpunished. Now, this word does not mean that God's taking the big like hammer over the top of our heads and just like banging us in the head with the hammer. This is actually worse than that. What this means, the biggest punishment in life is to not be able to step into God's ultimate plan and purpose for our life. That's the biggest punishment of all, is to miss out on the very reason why God created us to be here in the first place. See, what Proverbs is saying is essentially this, that when we try to rush the process in our life, that ultimately we're going to forfeit the promise. If we can't learn to wait, and we constantly always have to have, then eventually what that's going to do in our life is it's going to cause us to forfeit his promise for our life. The third one, the last one, is we got to live with margin. So we got to put God first, and we got to wait a little bit. But the third one is we got to live with margin. Now look at this, margin. It's not about buying less. It's about being ready so we can actually do more. You see, when we have margin in our finances, it enables you and I to be able to say yes to God when he stirs our heart to bless somebody. To be able to say yes to God when he wants us to partner with an initiative at the church or an initiative that we see. Like, if we don't have margin, Here's my belief. I don't think people have a generosity problem. I think they have a margin problem. I think they want to help. They want to be a blessing, but because there's no margin in their finances, they can't be a blessing. You see, here's what margin says. It says to God, I'm ready. That when you ask, when it's my turn to step up to the plate, I'm not just going to receive, but I'm going to release. What you've blessed me with, I'm not just going to hold on, but I'm going to use it like Joseph did to position Egypt to not just get through the famine, but to be a blessing to the nation in the famine. And friend, this message, it's not meant to put weight on you. It's meant to call something out of you. It's meant to call us to a higher way of living. See, the higher way of living isn't connected to boats or cars or houses or vacations or any of that. The higher way of living is living a life that's on purpose. It's making the decision that, God, I'm going to be a conduit, that as you bless me, that it's not going to just stagnate in me, but it's going to move through me to be a blessing to other people. And friend, it's when we, again, not lips, choices. It's when we begin to make those choices in our life that God looks down and he's like, I can trust that person. I can trust them, that when I send a blessing to them, that it's not going to stick in them, but it's going to move through them. And here's the reality, is that when it moves through us, we are blessed because of it. But we also get to bless other people because of it. Remember those two questions? Will you give me your heart, and will you give me your life? The life question is what we have in our hands today. It's what God has already blessed us with. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, how we steward what he's already given us says a lot about our heart. So let me close with this question. The question is what are you doing with the more that God has already put in your hands? Telling God that whenever you get that job or you get that raise or whatever it is, that I'll start doing this or that, that's not the way that God operates. The way he operates is what are the choices you're making with what I've already given you? That it's those choices that determine whether I can trust you with more. And friend, I want you to imagine with me for a moment. Imagine with me what God could do through a church full of people that put him first, that learned to wait, that had margin. It wouldn't just be changing a city, it'd be changing a nation. You're like, Ryan, that seems that's kind of far-fetched up there, is it? That's what he did with Joseph. He used Joseph to not just change a city, but to change a nation. One guy who put God first, was willing to wait, that left room for margin, created margin. One person, God used to change a nation. What could he do? Through a church full of people that were willing to put God first, to wait, to create margin. I don't know. but it'd be cool to find out.
Hey, thank you for watching today's message. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed down below to stay up to date with all of Transformation Church's life-changing content. Make sure you like, comment, or even share if you enjoyed today's message and it had an impact on your life. You never know what one share can do to someone else's life forever. For all of our service times and service locations, make sure you check us out online at transformedtlh.com. And hey, we would love to see your face in the place this Sunday.